Hello?
Turn the mics on here for a second. Mics are on now. Trustee Wendy McPherson. There's your own fan. Good. Who do we have on the telephone lines? Anyone?
Swan.
Oh, I heard a voice.
Trustee Swan?
Trustee Swan.
Thank you. Welcome.
Trustee Jacob?
Thank you very much, Trustee Jacobs. Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 13th, 2017 public session and call this to order and rise for singing of O Canada.
In our lives, songs command.
And Director, I'll ask you to do roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, trustees. This is our roll call for our board meeting of 13 December 2017. Trustee Armour. First Vice Chair Karkner.
Present.
Trustee Cram.
Present.
Trustee Jacobs.
Present.
Trustee Wendy McPherson.
Here.
Trustee Bill McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Second Vice Chair McDonald.
He's here.
Just here. Thank
Yes.
you. Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee Richards. Trustee Swan.
Present.
Student Trustee Marshall Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve consent agenda items 3.02 to 3.04, December 13th, 2017, as submitted. By Trustee Karkner, seconded by Trustee Richards. Cast your votes, please. That carries. Thank you very much.
Have to separate those two.
Do we have any conflict of interest declarations? Being there are none, we'll move forward to excuse me, report from private session. There were three motions. So I'm going to read the three motions out. I'll have to have movers for each one of them. The first is the Upper Canada District School Board approved resolution number PS 217, November 22nd -002, carried in the Committee of the Whole private session under agenda item D1, November 22nd, 2017. Do I have a mover for that? Trustee Karkner, seconded by Trustee Cram. Cast your votes, please. Thank you very much. Trustee Wendy McPherson. Thank you. Thank you very much. The second is the Upper Canada District School Board approved resolution number PS 217, November 22nd -003, carried in Committee of the Whole private session under agenda item D.1, November 22nd, 2017, moved by Trustee Bill McPherson, seconded by Trustee Richards. Again, cast your votes, please. That carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to the third motion that came out of that private session. The Upper Canada District School Board approved resolution number PS 217, November 22nd -004, carried in Committee of the Whole private session under agenda item D1, November 22nd, 2017. Moved by Trustee Wendy McPherson, seconded by Trustee McAllister. Cast your votes, please. We'll just have a show of hands. Thank you very much. That carries. Okay, moving on to our presentations. Our first presentation is Naismith Memorial Public School, and I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Barrett, who will do the introductions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to invite Principal Carmela Chocho to the board table, please. So Naismith Memorial Public School is located in Elmont, Ontario, and it is a vibrant part of that community. Naismith has a strong focus on academics, but also a very nice connection to the community. I know this evening they have the I'm going to trip over this one for sure. A
Very
very merry musical holiday, so Principal Chocho is missing out on that to join us here this evening, but they have many endeavors that connect their school student body to the community, and I look forward to hearing your presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is with pleasure that I join you this evening to share with you the story of, which button is it? The one on the right. That one. The story of the learning that is happening at Naismith Memorial Public School. Naismith is located in the northwest corner of our school board in the picturesque town of Almont. And we serve the west end of Almont as well as the rural areas extending west to the Lanark Highlands border and north to the Pakenham border. Naismith is a dual-track K-6 school of 250 students. 25% of our grade 1 to 6 students are registered in the regular French program, and 75% are in French immersion. We are committed to creating a collaborative and inclusive community of learners, and as such, we create blended groupings for the English subjects so that students from both programs have the opportunity to play and learn together. Our location within Almont definitely provides us with many perks. Our students benefit from being walking distance to the arena, the curling rink, Gemmell Park, and the Almont Old Town Hall. And thanks to a very supportive partnership with the Township of Mississippi Mills, we have easy access to these resources throughout the school year. So what does our EQAO data tell us? In the area of literacy, our EQAO data provides evidence of a positive trajectory. Our data shows that student achievement consistently improves in both reading and writing from the primary to the junior division. Worth noting is the cohort data for the group of students from 2014 to 2017. This past spring, that cohort demonstrated a 45% increase in reading from grade 3 to 6. That same group also demonstrated an increase of 55% in writing from grade 3 to 6. As a school community of learners, we are committed to working together to learn from the successful strategies that we have implemented in the development of literacy from the primary to the junior division, and finding ways to apply similar strategies to improve student achievement in numeracy. We have also identified early literacy development as an area of continued focus, given the great importance of early intervention for the development of reading skills in the primary grades. In the area of literacy, our analysis of student achievement data in the primary grades helped us to identify that our at-risk readers were still struggling with phonological awareness skills. The learning resource teacher and our primary language teachers collaborate to analyze running record assessment data to determine which strategies students are using and which they need to learn in order to make progress. Lagging phonological awareness skills are often identified as the missing piece, and difficulty mastering these skills is directly linked to lagging reading skills. When students enter grade 2, we look at their profiles as a reader to determine which 8 students to include in the Empower program. This program is designed to teach struggling readers a set of effective word identification skills and decoding strategies. Knowing that some of the success of this program lies in the systematic approach it uses to teaching decoding skills, we wondered if we more intentionally focused on skill building in this area in the kindergarten years, would we see an increase in student reading skills in grades 1 and 2. In September, the Sound Skills Assessment was administered to all kindergarten students. Results from this screener were analyzed and used to inform instructional moves by the educators. And during our learning team meetings, we discussed how we can more effectively embed literacy activities and games throughout the play-based kindergarten program during both the English and the French parts of the day. We are now in the early stages of our second cycle of inquiry, and we are seeing some early signs of success with many of our students. Examples of their personal writing provide evidence of their growing ability to apply the phonics. But we are also seeing that we still have a few students who continue to struggle and for whom we need to explore other strategies. By focusing on our students of mystery and our LD profile learners, we are becoming more analytical and reflective, and ultimately more skilled at identifying the instructional moves needed to help students achieve success in reading. It is important to note that although our current literacy goal is very focused on phonological instruction, our language work involves a balanced approach to teaching literacy throughout the play-based kindergarten program. Read aloud, shared reading, and writing are all key components of the literacy part of the program. In the area of mathematics, as a team, we are working on moving students along the continuum of skills in mathematics. As educators, we are deepening our understanding of both the continuum of curriculum expectations as well as the developmental stages of math learning in order to better inform our instructional next steps. We are benefiting from an excellent relationship with our learning partner, who supports our continued growth as math educators and provides some excellent mentoring to our math team. Teachers are collaborating to generate diagnostic assessments, review student work, and establish intentional teacher moves to move all students forward. Strategies are harvested from students and shared with the class, and students are guided towards choosing more efficient strategies as they progress through the continuum. The picture on the left shows the anchor chart that a teacher co-created with her grade 4-5 students to capture all the strategies that they can use when solving problems requiring multiplication. And the picture on the right was taken following a discussion done in a grade 3 class where students were asked to identify what they had learned thus far in math. In both cases, students were able to articulate what strategies they were using and what concepts they had learned. By helping students to be able to think about their learning, we are empowering them to take ownership for their learning and build those metacognitive skills needed to be lifelong learners. We are also working on creating a positive growth mindset in math from kindergarten to grade 6. Our junior classes have participated in the Weeks of Inspirational Math by mathematics professor and researcher Joe Bowler. Our goal is to instill an appreciation of problem-solving skills in all of our learners. We want them to be critical thinkers, willing to persevere when faced with complex problems to solve. The center graphic was taken from the ministry's Promoting and Supporting Student Wellbeing Strategy document, and it resonated with us because of its connection to the legacy of Dr. James Naismith. Although the sections appear to be separate entities, they really work in conjunction and often overlap. For example, our partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Lanark County provides students in grades 3 and 4 with the opportunity to participate in an after-school sports program. The goals of the program are to provide increased opportunity for physical activity while also supporting students in further developing emotionally and socially. Our student support partner is an important member of our school community. Her work leading community circles within our junior grade classes is having great impact on teaching students how to talk through their conflicts. In the primary classes, we are learning how we can use the zones of regulation and counsel's choices to help us develop both emotional resilience and effective social skills. Along with intramurals and extracurricular sports, we also offer students an opportunity to experience the love of music. Our music teacher provides opportunities for students to join drumming circles or be a member of the Naismith Singing Nighthawks. And later this week, the Singing Nighthawks will be singing at the Country Haven Long-Term Care Facility. And we are also very excited to be in the early planning stages of an intergenerational partnership with this organization. Our grade 6 students were once again very motivated this fall by their study of not-for-profit government agencies to raise awareness for communities in need, both locally and globally. Our Meet a Week Club and Student Council are actively supporting initiatives such as fundraising for books for a school in Anguilla, whose library was destroyed by Hurricane Irma, collecting donations for Operation Shoebox, and currently working on a campaign to support the Feeding Nunavut initiative. These are invaluable opportunities for them to collaborate and take on leadership roles in the school community. And I have a funny story to share with you about a group of young students who found a way to have their voices heard within our school. Last year, one of the teachers invited a few students to join her for one recess a week to build with Lego. This was really an opportunity to work on social skills, so it was by invite only. This past fall, she started it up again with a select little group of students. After a week or so, she couldn't figure out why so many more students were showing up for Lego Club. As she was walking through the hallway last week, she saw a hand-drawn flyer by a grade 2 student with a sign-up list, Lego Club, Mrs. Harding's room. The sign-up sheet was full, and our mystery was solved. And thankfully, we were able to take advantage of a great sale of Lego kits to add to our collection. Naismith is currently the oldest elementary school in Elmont, which explains the deep community connections between the school and many Elmont families. We have a number of staff members who graduated from Naismith, as well as the parents of many of our students. And we even have a few teachers who are now teaching the children of students they taught early on in their careers. This all adds to the feeling of community that runs deep in all that we do. Newcomers to the school community are quick to comment on how welcoming it feels, and they enjoy the opportunity to connect with other families during our annual potluck chili skate night and our end-of-year barbecue. This school year, As a staff, we have committed to creating opportunities to help our students participate in both local and global initiatives that serve to spread caring and kindness. One teacher shared her story of how she learned about the Kindness Rocks project when she came across painted rocks in a park in Buffalo this summer. The students were intrigued by the story and decided that they wanted to contribute to this project. So they began to paint rocks, and on the back they wrote NMPS Rocks. The rocks have been placed in parks, along walkways, and in flower beds throughout our local Elmont community. And it is the students' hope that anyone who finds a rock would know that a Naismith student had painted that rock in the hopes that it would bring happiness to the person who found it. Every June, the grade 6 students determine what legacy they wish to leave to Naismith. The Student Council uses the funds it raises from the Christmas holiday shop to purchase something for the school. Past purchases include beanbag chairs and other special seating for the Learning Commons and new team jerseys. They also work together to decide on a theme for their special gift, for their special tips from grade 6. And you can see the poster on the right is last year's tips from grade 6. In previous years, themes included how to be a friend and teamwork and collaboration. This past June, they chose how to be a positive role model. There's a great deal of history in Elmont, and Naismith School is proud to have been named after Dr. James Naismith, who was born and raised in Elmont and who later went on to invent the game of basketball. In reading up on Dr. Naismith, we learned of how he lived his life with the belief that we should all be attentive to developing both our mind and body, and that we should strive to live a life dedicated of leadership and service to others. This is the legacy that Dr. Naismith has left to the Naismith School community, and we are deeply committed to honoring this legacy through our continued focus on developing the whole child and teaching our students the value of leadership as a way of helping others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to comments and questions, but I know you're absolutely blessed by having Trustee Cram as your trustee, so I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Cram first.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know how blessed Naismith is because back a few years ago, when I was interested in becoming a teacher, which is a few years ago, one of my schools that I did practice teaching in was at Naismith. So I do have a legacy that goes back that far, although Naismith may not want to admit that legacy is there. This is a school I'm very proud of. It's within walking distance of my house, and that may be a disadvantage to Naismith too, but it's a very unique experience in that school because it combines an integrated large rural component of the Mississippi Mills with being located in a small, growing, vibrant town. So I'm very, very, very happy with this school. It's got a very active parent council, and you can tell that by the number of people who come to their meeting, and also by the activities that they do have at night for parents and the number of parents that do show up at these. So I'm very pleased with the school.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Trustee Kartner.
I was just looking at thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the EQAO results, and I was just trying to figure out if I've got the right years here. So the 2013-14 primary would be the grade 3s getting 40 in reading, right? I'm reading that right? It's your third frame. So that cohort would be 2015-16?
No, 17.
2016-17.
Yes.
All right. So there's been quite an improvement over those 3 years of those students.
Yes, there has.
So, I'm sure that is going to be the trend as you look through them all has changed. So something's going right. Congratulations on that.
Through you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Anyone on the phone lines?
I'm on the phone line, but I don't have a comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Thank you very much for the presentation. Safe travels back home.
Thank you.
Okay, the next presentation we have is Seaway Intermediate and Secondary School. And I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Allen, who's going to introduce Principal Lewis and Vice Principal Barker.
It's my great pleasure to welcome to the table Principal Dawn Lewis, and new to our board and new to Seaway, Vice Principal Eric Barker. Many trustees had the opportunity last year during the park process to visit Seaway District High School, as they were the gracious hosts to some of the park meetings last year. But you only got to see it at night, so you didn't see how it's lovely. It's so settled on the St. Lawrence River, and hence the name Seaway. And they also had quite a celebration last year, which will be represented in the presentation tonight. We're really pleased with the leadership these two gentlemen are bringing to the school, and lots of exciting new partnerships that are happening there. And so we look forward to sharing with you tonight the leading and the learning that's happening at Seaway.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. And through you, Chair, thank you for the opportunity to share our Seaway story. For me, it's been a bit of a homecoming because that's where I started my teaching career back in the mid-90s, and Trustee McAllister and I were working there together at that time, and through until about 2004. So I've been back there now. This is my 4th year. And then, as Superintendent Allen said, we've been joined this year by Vice Principal Barker.
So I've been working for 4 months, and I've been interviewing people regularly about the history of Seaway because I wanted to know how it evolved. So currently, Seaway District High School is a grade 7 to 12 school situated in the village of Iroquois, serving the South Dundas community, including the town of Morrisburg and the village of Williamsburg. We currently have 129 students in grades 7 and 8, and 276 students in grade 9 through 12. And we offer both regular immersion French programming for the grade students in 7 through 12. Our students come from families with large agricultural background, along with some small industries related to transportation, manufacturing, and construction. We have significant portion of our student population from single or low-income families and regularly access the Champion for Kids and Jumpstart to support our students and families outside of school. We have strong ties and support from our community as represented by strong support for our SHISM and cooperative education programs, and the annual support we receive financially for our students at graduation time, and as displayed during the public meetings through the last year's art process. Currently, annually, over $40,000 is provided to our graduates. And in May, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of joining the former Iroquois and Morrisburg High Schools, along with the later arrival of students from the Mountain District.
And there are a couple people in the room here this evening who are part of that celebration last year, I believe, as well. So, as pertains to our EQAO data, when we're taking a look at the applied and the academic math scores, which are on the left up there, in general we are at or slightly above both board and provincial averages, both in the academic and the applied. Our academic scores, we're quite pleased with those last year. Our applied scores, while generally above the board average, and in some cases above the provincial average, recognizing that there's still a lot of work to be done there. We've been really through a learning team work, we'll talk a bit more about that in a couple of slides, but we spent a lot of time 2 years ago looking at the continuum from grade 7 through 10, and as such identified some areas where we could streamline things in grade 7 and 8, not spending as much time, for example, on the data management stream and spending more time on the number, sense, and numeracy. And we've started to see some of the impacts of that in terms, in particular, some of the what we might term more basic math skills as students are moving into grade 9. And also developing a better understanding of maybe some of the math terminology that is used so that we have a sort of common language that we're using in teaching math from grade 7 right through grade 12. While we're somewhat pleased in terms of how we're doing with our math scores, our literacy scores, I'll be quite frank, have been, I guess, rather frustrating over the last few years. As you can see, there was a dip about 4 years ago from 80 down to 65%. And then it's kind of stayed in sort of the mid to high 60s since then. We recognize that not only is that below provincial average, it's also below the board average. The dip from 4 years ago, there had been a practice for a few years prior to that of deferring more students than we have been doing over the last few years, so that explains sort of the one-off dip. But over the last few years, we've been working on a number of different strategies to try and improve the literacy scores through, after some sort of pre-assessment work, doing some intensive support work with the students. We sort of triaged to determine the students that we felt needed maybe a sort of quick brush up on what they needed to do in getting ready for the literacy course, to students that, as we referred to it, maybe needed a sort of full engine change in terms of, what we wanted to do to help prepare them for the literacy test. The last 2 years, we've moved all of the instruction for grade 10 students into the first semester to make sure that that takes place before they get to the literacy test. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a significant improvement yet. One thing that we started 2 years ago now, and the students who are reaping the benefits of that are now in grade 10 this year, is to do some more intentional teaching of some of the strategies and some of the elements that students will see on the literacy test as part of the grade 7 and grade 8 curriculum as well. So we're hoping to see some improvements from that coming up with this year's scores. As pertains to our graduation rate, and as reflected as part of the director's work plan, we had 5 students identified who would be considered fifth-year students who are still at Seaway. All 5 of these are on track to graduate either at the end of this semester or by the end of June. We had 1 student who was with us up until about May of last year, and then unfortunately, due to a need to be working outside of school, he was unable to finish with us. He's now at TR, and I understand that we're hopeful that he will also be able to graduate by the end of this semester.
During our literacy team sessions, there were 2 important facts that we needed to recognize, and that was that reading continues through adolescence, reading instruction, reading development. And the other one was that reading demands diverge into different content areas. For example, the reading demands in a science classroom for a lab look a lot different than the reading demands in a tech class, which might be, for example, like creating a bill of sale. With that in mind, our literacy team had 2 focuses. One was increase reading comprehension skills for all students, and the other one was to integrate literacy teaching strategies in all subject areas. So for our preliminary student assessments, we noticed that typically students are struggling with their comprehension skills, despite being able to decode text. And we heard this from students, where students said, I can read the text, but I don't understand the text. So to address this gap, we determined that more explicit instruction is needed in the area of reading comprehension skill development. And what that meant for our literacy teachers, whether that be in the English stream or the French stream, was we needed more explicit modeling on comprehension skills specifically, more guided instruction, and individual practice for students. The second focus of our literacy stream is capacity building for literacy instruction in all content subject areas. So currently our literacy team teachers are focusing on using explicit instruction to address reading comprehension skill development in their own classes. But we're also focusing on supporting content area teachers like science teachers or tech teachers or history teachers in developing reading comprehension strategies in their own teaching.
As it pertains to our math, and I mentioned earlier some of our cross-division work from grade 7 through 10. More specifically, this year, our first goal for this, our first if-then statement for the SIPSA cycle was looking around being more explicit with our use of learning goals and success criteria. And we'd spent a lot of time working on that as a staff over the last couple of years, but this was sort of getting into the mud and working hand in hand with teachers on what is it going to look like in a grade 7 or a grade 8 or a grade 9 math class. It followed some work that we had done when we had the pleasure of working with Chris Sertam from the University of Ottawa as an increased needs math school. She came down and we had a learning day with her along with the staff from South Grenville back in May. Our second cycle for the SIPSA is right now looking at the triangulation of data, where we're not just looking at what we would maybe term the product, or oftentimes in math it might look as a test or a quiz, but it's also using the power of observations and conversations. In particular, when we take a look at what's going on in our grade 9 math class, when it comes either time for the preliminary report or we just went through the midterm report, it involves the teacher sitting down with the students, sort of doing a review of how does the student feel about their achievement, sort of having the teacher's perspective on how she feels with how the student's doing in that class, then helping to set some goals for the rest of the semester for that student. In terms of when we're looking at observations, it's through different formats, whether it's videoing or taking a snapshot of something that a student is doing, and then also using that as evidence of learning, either to help guide the student in what they need to do, to improve, or also in terms of helping the teacher to have a better understanding of what she can do in terms of helping to work with the classroom as a whole. We are also one of the schools that's taking part in the Building Capacity and Assessment in Mathematics Inquiry Project. Unfortunately, I don't have a short acronym for that. But the secondary teacher that's part of our learning team, also with another intermediate teacher and myself, have been part of that. We've had 2 days, one at Rideau, and then last week we're at Maynard. And again, it really, I think, dovetails with what we're doing on our second SIPSA cycle, where, having a lot of discussions around what are some different ways that we can assess students, as we would maybe term it, the assessment of learning is sort of the summative piece of what students are doing at the end of a unit, but it's also, those steps along the way to help really guide students, not just waiting for the test to help them understand how they're doing, but also guide them as they're going throughout the unit or throughout the course.
So one of our concerns is as how students can communicate with us their concerns and how we make sure that they're mentally and their well-being is supported. One of the areas is the Tell Them From Me survey. They identify concerns related to anxiety, self-esteem, and connectedness. We have started using mental health and wellness minutes on our morning announcements. We've listened to the students, and they said they wanted increased spirit opportunities along with student council, such as Theme Thursdays, which started with our intermediate student leaders. They've asked for coaching regarding their own time management skills and coping strategies and how to manage their behavior with cell phone use. Other ways we're supporting the students is through our link and web leaders, who help students transition into grade 7 and grade 9, but not just using that as an orientation opportunity, but using that as a continuous support that runs throughout the school year. We support our students and families financially through Champions for Kids and the Jumpstart program. We're having a Christmas feast coming up for our 7, 8, and 9 students. And we have different extracurricular activities and sports programs running, such as our environmental club or our volleyball and our basketball teams.
A couple things to highlight from there as well is what was done around Orange Shirt Day, which we had this year. With that, the link leaders had a little tile which each student was to draw something of an indigenous nature related to something that relates to them. And then if you, it's the picture on the top left there, then along with the art teacher, they created a mosaic with all of these, so it represented sort of each student in the school. As it turned out, we also had some elementary students in the building that day as well who were able to join in and sort of have their piece of that. And the display has just gone up outside the room where the link class meet every day, so that just went up the other day. One of the things that we're going to be hosting next week is our grad breakfast, where we invite recent graduates from Seaway, whether or not they've gone off to college or university or the world of work, who can sort of share their experiences of the first year or two away from high school. The teacher who organizes that sort of sets up a Facebook group with it, so then, let's say if Don Lewis is coming back from Algonquin and has been working on restoration carpentry up there, and there's a student that's maybe interested in going for that, then they have a chance to connect one-on-one. Unfortunately, one of the challenges that we're facing this year is due to the college strike. Some of our most recent grads aren't going to be able to take part from colleges, but we do have some that have been out of Seaway maybe 2 or 3 years who are going to be able to come back for that as well. Eric mentioned earlier some of the community support that we receive, and we're quite pleased with our SHISM programs, Specialist High Skills Major. While we recognize that we're wanting to get to that 25% threshold that the province is looking at, right now we're sitting at 19% of our students last year graduated with a Red Seal diploma. Currently, we have had in the past transportation and agriculture, which, given our farming community and a lot of the small engine and some of the trucking companies in our area, certainly reflect that element of our community. This year, we're starting a SHISM in construction, and one of the interesting outcomes out of the ARC process last year, we had the township and one of our local employers, Ross Video, who were sort of a real high-tech leader in the area, came to the school and said, look, we would like to see if we could start this information and communication technology schism. So out of that, last year we started an after-school coding program just to see if there was enough interest on the part of the students, and we are right now in the process of doing an application to start up an information and communication technology schism for next year. One of our sort of annual celebrations, if you will, and it's a good transition activity to invite the students from Iroquois Public across the field and to bring the grade 6s from Morrisburg down, as our annual Hay Day, which is a kind of agricultural games day, if you will. And it's really interesting just to see, it's one day when all of the big tractors, Mom and Dad let Johnny or Susie have the big tractor is driven to school, and depending upon how wet the field is or not, last year with the big tractor park was in the parking lot, but a couple of years previous it was out on the field if it was dry enough to do that. And then there's a lot of sort of fun games, and it, as I said earlier, it's a chance to celebrate our agricultural connection, but it's also a really good transition activity where we'll welcome the grade 6s from Iroquois Public and Morrisburg down to join us as well. Thank you for being able to share our Seaway story.
Thank you very much. I know that your trustee is Trustee Jeremy Armour, and Jeremy can't join us tonight. You know that the director and I were down at Seaway a couple months ago, I believe, and Trustee Armour was with us. It was very evident that he's extremely proud of the work that's going on at that school. A chance to not only watch Jeremy in that school, we also had a chance to talk to the staff and the students, and the students are amazing kids down there. They made all of us feel extremely welcome, so thank you for that. I'm going to open it up to comments or questions. Trustee McAllister.
This is a bit of a homecoming for me, because I spent 32 years at Seaway as a teacher and worked with Don and many others in here. I'm needless to say, I'm very proud of Seaway and the work that you are doing now, Don. I noticed your schisms, you've got 4. When I started there back in 1968, we had a machine shop, refrigeration, drafting, carpentry, electrical shop, automotive, and small engines. And all those shops, I think, have changed over the years, but could you bring us up to speed on what's, how that change has occurred and what is happening now with regard to the shops?
I can probably speak back to about the mid-90s when I came there, and we moved the physics room into the old drafting room, which I had to explain to some students what drafting used to be. It had nothing to do in terms of pulling animals or anything like that. It was actual, drawing and that mechanical drawing and that kind of thing. Currently, and really since then, we have the construction shop, which this year the construction teacher that we have is going to be starting a green technologies construction program, along with what he's already been doing with our construction students. The transportation, the auto shop, I guess is for lack of a better term, is he runs a combined transportation, also a manufacturing or welding program out of that. As it pertains to the schism, transportation was our first schism, so Robert Knapp was the lead teacher and continues to take the lead role with that. And then he also, along with a couple other teachers, saw the need, and again, as I said earlier, the really strong agricultural connection. So that's, those have both been going now for, I think agriculture has been 3 years and transportation's been 4 years since those have been running.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Trustee Bill McPherson.
Thank you. I'd love to jump on the tractor day, but we'll move on to something else. You mentioned mental health and wellness minutes as part of your morning announcements. Can you kind of describe how that works?
And I don't want to take Superintendent Allen's comments for later, because I know she's presenting on this, but something we received at our principal meeting, I guess about a month ago, was a resource from the Ontario Principals Council, and the students, and this goes back to our sort of student voice group, had said one of the things they wanted were some quick tips, sort of daily tips as part of her morning announcements. And then from that, so it's sort of the scramble, okay, where do I get something that is sort of school connected, that hopefully is vetted through the appropriate channels? And it's Mind Your, I've got it bookmarked anyway. It is one of the resources that came out of the Ontario Principal Council. Sorry, Allison. Mind Your Mind, sorry, is the website. So they've got it categorized under a number of different areas, from things, they've got one for, seasonal changes. So we've had a couple related to sort of moving from fall to winter. There's some last Fridays related to positive and respectful relationships. Some of them, and, as we're starting to take a look at what the themes are going to be for each day. Some of them are around when we're starting to get ready for exams that are going to be coming up after the holiday break. The one from today was more related to just general motivation and sort of getting started, and then getting that first step and then going from there. So,
okay. Are there any other questions? Comments? Well, Vice Principal Barker, welcome to our board. I hope that the first few months have been a good experience for you. You certainly are with an incredible principal. You're learning a lot from Don. I know that. I want to thank both of you for being here tonight, and safe travels. Have a good holiday season.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next item, which is the mental health overview, and I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Allen, who's going to introduce Dr. Inglis and Dr. Armstrong, and our principal, Debbie Banks.
It brings me pleasure to bring to the table our mental health leadership team and our board. So as our chair has referenced, our chief psychologist, Dr. David Armstrong, Dr. Allison Inglis, and our principal of special education, Debbie Banks, and myself form the mental health leadership team. And we are the guiders, but we are not, we work with a wide variety of people to bring together a mental health plan, as well as the implementation of that plan. So in our board improvement plan, we start with the statement, our belief statement about mental health and the learning of all our students. And it says that we believe if we establish consistent, equitable, and intentional culture of well-being and inclusivity in all of our schools, then all of our students will experience a positive sense of self and belonging, and develop skills to make positive choices and live healthy lives to fulfill their full potential. And that statement is a very important statement in where our starting point is. The other important piece, and you've seen this, some of these graphics already tonight in our school improvement plan, these are the two graphics from the well-being strategy from the ministry. And there are many components, or there are several components to this strategy, but as was referenced in one of our earlier presentations tonight, they don't stand alone. They intersect with each other, and it also intersects with many of the other components of work in our board, whether it's equity and safe schools or leading and learning. So that's another important piece, that the mental health and well-being do intersect with much of our work. We are very fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from the School Mental Health Assist program. This is a provincial implementation support team. It was designed to support school boards across the province. It started about 5 years ago. It was implemented in 3 waves. We were in wave 3 of that. And through that program, we are able to gain resources and ideas and systematic research about school mental health. And one of the ones, our last presentation, and we didn't know he was going to refer to that, but the mental health minutes came from that group, and they worked with the provincial the Ontario Provincial Principals Council to develop some of those resources, and we actually have just used some of them today with our principals in a training session. One of the pieces of being a partner in the Mental Health Assist is that every school board must have a mental health leader, and in our case it's leaders, and we are very appreciative of the leadership and the good counsel we get from Dr. Armstrong and Dr. Inglis in leading our programming.
So in our district, we provide support to our students in our schools using a tiered approach. So our Tier 1 is really where those foundational practices take place in our classrooms, our hallways, our schools, our playgrounds, impacting all of our students. Our system staff provide support in both a proactive and reactive manner, with our goal being to provide school staff with those proactive supports for students in their classrooms. Through material that's presented on System PA Days, we're building school capacity around the facilitation of welcoming, inclusive classroom environments where staff know their learners and respond to the learners based on their understanding of different strategies. Right from greeting students at the door to start their day off or class positively, our PD reflects the vital role that caring adults play in creating positive cultures for our students. Our PD messaging reflects the importance of knowing the learner, their strengths, their hopes and dreams, and creating pertinent learning opportunities for them. So our foundation of Tier 1 is we create positive, welcoming, safe learning environments where effective instruction that responds to the learners is taking place. We believe that we are supporting 80% of our students in 80% of our students. This is reflective of the capacity building that our staff are receiving in the areas of math and other curricular areas such as health and phys ed. We are all working collaboratively to create non-threatening learning environments where worthwhile tasks are presented to build students' capacity as independent, curious, caring learners. We believe that by building capacity in the construction of our Tier 1 foundation, that we will be able to provide the supports that many of our students will need to complete their journey towards the world of work. For the approximately 15% of our students who may fall in Tier 2 who require that additional support, we provide staff who are knowledgeable in the areas of specific needs, such as our student support partners, who support mental health and helping our students determine how to navigate and manage hurdles in their lives. Our intensive support teachers support building capacity and programming for students with exceptional needs. Our special services counselors are excellent resources to assist us when we begin to see those flags that a student may be struggling in our schools. The top tier, Tier 3, represents approximately 1 to 5% of our students. For those students, we do provide individualized, specialized care from our special services counselors, our student support partners, our itinerant student support workers, our autism therapists, our psych team, and our speech team. Our intensive support team acts in ways to support individual student cases as well as large group. Our psych team works on an individual basis where they are able to use their skills to identify students' areas of strength and needs. Then at the school level, we can build upon that information to create programming and situation that is suited to the students' interests and needs. Our speech team works individually with students to assist them with being able to communicate their wants, needs, concerns, hopes, and dreams. As a system, we all play a role at different times in a student's journey so that they feel cared for, supported, empowered, and connected to their school community.
We have our mental health strategy plan is a detailed plan, and we've been able to summarize it in a smaller version that is easily referenced by schools and by the general public who would like to reference our plan. Dr. Inglis will speak to the components of this plan.
I'm trying to see the components of the plan, unfortunately, but you have it in front of you. The top part of on the top left is what Val already covered, but I want to speak to the bottom left of the screen, where we have our mental health plan mission, vision, and commitments laid out. And thank you to the Living Well Committee for helping us look at this more closely and just tidy up some of the language. I want to point out that the mission statement that we have up there is very much aligned with our board mission statement. That was important to us and to the committee. And that what we're doing is we're creating a culture of mental wellness that prepares all students for a successful life. We wanted to include that in our mission statement. Our vision is very much aligned with the Provincial School Mental Health Assist vision, as well as work that is ongoing in our board, that our staff and students feel connected to each other, to their schools and their communities, and that they are literate when it comes to mental health and wellness. And the commitments that we have are those that we share right across the board. The second page, which you see on the, oh, that's the right one, my right and my left. I'm getting my right and my left mixed up. The second page shows our 4 core work areas in quadrants with examples for what we hope to continue doing in the 2017-18 school year. The quadrants articulate 4 areas of focus for the next 3 years that align with our mission, and we anticipate will keep us moving forward toward our vision to build the connectedness and the literacy. And these areas of focus and associated activities connect and they interact. Therefore, we've got the circular arrows in the middle. And right in the middle of those arrows are the 4 pillars as identified by School Mental Health Assist for work around mental health in schools. And we'll come back to those pillars and to our areas of focus and to the specific activities in a little bit. And because we want to start articulating more clearly our outputs and our outcomes, and we'll see that after David covers the next set of slides where we'll dig a little more deeply into some of the specifics within those 4 quadrants.
And as Alison referenced, we do have you have an attachment of the full document in your board docs.
Mental health's often it's an interesting thing to define because often I think what's evidenced, or people will point to evidence, is that there's a CYW in every building, right? Or there's a person the kids go to talk to. When really a comprehensive strategy is one in which we'd like to support the student feels supported within their school and by every staff member. And towards that end, we've got kind of 4 different goal areas here. The first one looking at the programming that we use for stress and coping, using programming that works. Secondly is the literacy amongst educators. I'll go into that in a little bit. The pathways to care, so when there is mental illness or these are beyond simply growing mental health in our students, how do we seek further assistance? And also that they have information and resources, both parents, families, communities, and the students as well. So if we go on to the next one here, this one's about enhancing the accessibility of mental health information. We're working closely with our communications department on this one. That is enhancing the awareness of our mental health strategies, what we're doing here, as well as on the new website, and sending it out to staff, and also designing it in a much more accessible format. I've got Dr. Inglis here to thank for that. When I had that job, it was, I don't know, about an 18-page document or so. It was terrible. Now it looks a lot nicer. Also working with our Learning Commons to build recommended resource regarding mental health, developing draft educator tip sheets that delve a little more into specific areas, a little bit beyond what's in Supporting Minds, and populating the board website. On the second one there, developing mental health literacy. And when I say mental health literacy, what we're thinking of is that it's strategies to create mental healthy schools and classrooms. It's information on the most common mental health difficulties seen in schools, how to support vulnerable students and routes to local services. And so we do that through, for example, tiered training, which includes Supporting Minds and Leading Mentally Healthy Schools, the phys ed curriculum, and classroom-based stress coping problems. Also what we're doing there is the pathways work, which is very similar. We've also got some wonderful documents that predate us as mental health leaders in checkered flags, for example, fantastic document. We want to do more with that, as well as our further doing work on supporting minds. You'll hear us talk a lot about that. Use of already established community protocols such as the Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Risk Review Protocol and training, and also looking at what are our pathways to our community mental health providers who really, and addictions, who really do have the expertise in treating mental illness. And finally, here on our last goal is the implementation of mental health promotion, prevention, and early intervention programming. So what is the programming we're actually doing in classrooms? And that are things like evidence-based programs such as Roots of Empathy, Mind Masters, Friends for Life, and Stick to the Facts. I will put a little plug in that Val doesn't know I'm going to do. That we actually partnered with CHIO and University of Ottawa last year on a randomized control trial for the new Mind Masters, and it was fantastic. So it's high quality research showing that with a section of our kids, our grade 3 students, that Mind Masters was effective at decreasing self-reported rates of anxiety, stress, negative affect, but also increasing social emotional recognition skills. So that's just one of the projects that we've been working on as we're going through this, which is to make sure what we're doing works.
So this also you have in your handout, and we just wanted to put this up. This is very much in draft. This is a work in progress. And it's a way of representing or keeping ourselves on track. And what you see are our goal, our mission at the top, our long-term outcome, or our vision at the bottom of this page. And this is set up to represent our work using the 4 pillars that the School Mental Health Assist asks us to base our work on. And down the right-hand side, right-hand side is what we call the implementation backbone. So those are all of the things that help us to keep this work going and to inform the work. What you'll see us starting to do is identifying more clearly our activities as they currently are happening and what we propose to do. You'll see us identifying the target groups for those for that work. The outputs, so those are the really identifying what the activities will be. So number of sessions, number of groups, number of what have you. And then our outcomes we're starting to develop. So those are our measurements. I mean, really, what's the impact been on the things that we hope to have impact on? And that will bring us, and you'll see we're still trying to define some of our dates, but that will bring us towards moving us closer to our overall vision.
We have a number of supports for our plan. As I referenced earlier, we certainly benefit from the successes and the feedback from other boards across the province and knowing what they're working on. We also have aligned a lot of our work with the directors in the director's work plan with goal number 3 to increase students' ability to deal with stress, and so a lot of our work is supporting that. We are also we get feedback from our Live and Well committee, and that's a multidisciplinary committee that has parent reps, has youth department, It's my fire-breathing videos.
celebrate the fact that the senator scored a goal.
Yeah, I've already turned it all the way down.
It's about 100.
Microphones are back on, and they seem to be.
Might have been something that was loose.
Could have been something.
Great.
Superintendent Allen, I apologize for that, but it's getting pretty windy in here. Thank you.
So we do receive feedback from our Living Well committee. We, on that committee, as I was saying, we have representatives from our teacher unions, our senior staff, our trustees, our community PIC, as well as our mental health partners from our various counties. So it's a well-rounded information that we get back from that, and we also present to committees like our operations council or exec councils on the strategies and approaches that we're implementing. And the other supports for our plan is the training that we are implementing across our system. So training is provided on a monthly basis through PD days, through family of schools meetings. Today we had a leadership day for our principals, and we had a whole section on wellness and our mental health plan with them. And we also have staff training days where we staff come and are released to attend those.
So just an extension of what our Superintendent Allen was just talking about. So the work that we have underway is we've provided schools with training on creating non-threatening classroom environments and strategies for knowing their learners and guiding them through ministry resources such as Supporting Minds. This is an excellent resource that contains specific strategies that can be applied in our classrooms and in our schools for attending to the needs of students who may be experiencing anxiety or difficulty focusing or managing their behavior, just to name a few that are in this resource. All of our system PD and the PD that our system staff are delivering across the district contains the same message. The important role that we as school staff play in creating learning environments where students feel cared for, cared about, and supported along their pathway. As a school staff, we know that our role is ever changing as our learners' needs change. So every day we have those multiple opportunities to model problem-solving care, respect, and inclusion for all our learners. Resources such as these help us do this. And as we acquire new knowledge from our professional development and apply our new learning to our schools, our students are the beneficiaries. What doesn't change is the need for our students to leave our buildings having experienced support and care in the daily interactions they have with adults in our schools, and a feeling that the classroom and the school that they return to is calm, safe, predictable, and supportive of their own needs.
One of the big initiatives this year will be incorporating a wellness goal into our school improvement plans, as well as building on a wellness goal in our board improvement plan. We are introducing this gradually, and we expect to have schools establish a wellness goal by the third cycle of our SIPSA. As we've been projecting tonight, a lot of the work of the mental health work is integral and integrated with what we're doing already in schools. So the wellness goal will reflect the SIPSA cycle, where schools will make a plan based on data that they have. They'll work on actions, they'll observe what's happening, and then they'll reflect at the end of where they have come from and where they need to go to in that cycle of continuous improvement. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, what are the system supports for schools, and are they consistent with the needs across the board? Many people will ask, is one school more needy than others, and are we addressing that in our system staff and our staff support? So currently, our staffing is generally assigned based on the number of schools, which reflects our population, and also with consideration to geography. But we also take in three other factors that influence the staffing of system staff allocations. First of all, the readiness for kindergarten, so based on the EDI data. Secondly, needs related to student aggression. And thirdly, Safe for Now plans. So most of our system staff are assigned in clusters of schools that are geographically close by, and they generally have a fixed schedule that's predictable, so the students know when system staff are coming into their buildings. But there's also flex worked into that schedule to allow schools to respond, or to allow system staff to respond to schools that have needs that are rising during the day. We do have a few system roles that have been referenced this evening, like speech and psych associates, that are assigned to groups of schools, and they work on a caseload basis. So Dr. Armstrong is going to speak to us about the data that we use for these decisions.
And this team has been fantastic at challenging us to think about how do we know what we're doing works. Before we've talked about performance indicators, and we're still looking at those. The last time I think we were here, we were talking about using programs that work, programs that have been demonstrated to work with very similar populations. And we also want to dig a little bit deeper and look at are the way we provide supports to schools and the amount of staffing, is that makes sense? Is that consistent? One of the tools we used, and this is through significant help from Superintendent Dawes, is through the EDI scores. So this is it's a tool that's done every 2 to 3 years in the last half of kindergarten. A kindergarten teacher will rate their students there. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner there, if we had 100 kids, EDI would say that the top 75% of them, there's no concerns. There are some more concerns about the next 15% of them, and that would be almost in every kind of school. And that we call the at-risk range. And then there'd be the vulnerable range, the bottom 10% of students who need that external support. So we thought, well, can we take a look at what the quote-unquote average student would be in a school, and where do they fall in this continuum provincially? So with the next slide here, what we saw is that there's no school average in Upper Canada that's within that vulnerable range. Certainly every school had children in every range, but if we look and see where the average is, the average child in no school in Upper Canada is within that vulnerable range. There are a few schools that are kind of within that at-risk range in terms of the average student. The bottom bullet specifically, so 2 out of 60 elementary schools identified lower than expected or at the at-risk range regarding speech and language and cognitive development in those scores. And what we've done there historically is that they receive double the speech-language assistant time and consistently about the speech-language pathology time as well to enhance the use of language and through that conceptual understanding. And also, about 12 out of 60 elementary schools identified lower than expected emotional maturity in that kindergarten, and 7 kind of as lower social competence. And what we've done in those circumstances is often the locally developed schedules of those 2 to 3 to 4 schools that student support partner would have. Many of the schools would say, okay, we know this is kind of a heavier school. Why don't you spend an extra day or half day with them at the cost of another kind of school. And so we've got some flexibility built into those SSP schedules to cover some of those. None of the schools that we were looking at were complete surprises because the other communication systems we have and checking in with our clinical staff were quite well at establishing the need. With the next one, too, we also wanted to look at student aggression. So this is health and safety data. When a student or when a staff member is hit, kicked, whatever, there's some form of aggression, spit, that staff will let us know by filling that out so that we can intervene. Health and safety knows as well. We looked at, for example, just September 2017 to pull this information up, and we only looked at the number of staff, not necessarily the number of incidents for statistical reasons. And we looked and saw that about 3.5 staff per school recorded incidents in that month on average of aggression. And there was a large variety in schools, though, ranging from anywhere from 0 to 22 of these reports per schools. The top 5% of respondents, we chose just to flag to see where they were, are generally large elementary schools that submit more than 10 reports in 2017, and certainly there were no surprises to us when we noticed that the SSPs were spending more time in those schools. So the locally developed schedules, again, were benefiting, and the flexible time were benefiting those schools. In the next one, too, we also collect Safe for Now plans. So these are every time one of our students is thinking about suicide or is in personal crisis, our staff responding to that would fill out one of these quote-unquote forms, but really it's an interview tool or decision tool to help understand, okay, what are our next steps in this situation? Those get submitted to Dr. Inglis and I for more statistical analysis like this. So we wanted to see over the 2016-2017 year, where were they? Did we have pockets or clusters within our school board that we saw enhanced kind of crises? Overall, if we look at the I guess the county lens of it. The county, you'll see up there, the differences in the percentages largely reflected the population, where we had, fewer in kind of Lanark and Prescott-Russell and more in the SD&G and Leeds-Grenville areas. The numbers range from 0 to 8 reports in the year, with larger secondary schools submitting more, and that was, again, no surprise kind of to us either. So overall, I mean, what's the overall message from, again, that was a brief view. We wanted to dig a little deeper, I think, into this data. Geeks like me were kind of excited by these numbers. And so regional staffing, what's the overall view, though? The regional staffing, according to the population and number of schools, often mirrors needs in our geography, with some specific situations in which we kind of increase the staffing temporarily or increasing staffing that we have. In some cases, like I said, adjustments have been made to make staff more available in some enhanced needs schools, such as more regional SLA time or local SSP schedules. And there have been enhancements in the staff complements taken into consideration with these. For example, another social worker, what we call a special supports counselor, and other schedules as well, and IST safety behavior to help out with some of these schools.
So as you can see, the mental health plan is not a standalone plan. It's very complex and very integrated, and it takes many of us working together to make a difference for our students. And we are strongly committed to that, and hopefully tonight we have conveyed to you that we have a vision and we have some strategies that support that vision, and that we're working step by step forward to making things better and stronger supports for our students in our schools.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to comments and questions. Trustee Kirkner.
Just a question about the tragic situation team I don't know what the right terminology, crisis team?
Crisis response.
Are you is that part of the mental health, or is that health and safety, or are they connected in any way? Because we do have, different mental health issues that happen that are emergencies.
Through you, Chair, we do have a program guide that's a crisis response, and it comes through the superintendents and then is referred to one of our doctors to help deploy staff. And I'll let you, Allison or David, do you want to just speak about how we deploy that?
Sure. So, I mean, we've got the manual that kind of outlines it. It's not a specific part of our mental health plan beyond, I guess, the suicide intervention, although we do have kind of a strategy for that. And the mental health leads and perhaps our regional staff that are have more I guess specialized training in mental health are a crucial part of that. I mean, I can go on to explain kind of what's the process, but it's not specifically in this plan, but certainly a part of the work that we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Your EDI data. You mentioned that we have 12 out of 60 elementary schools within the at-risk range. Through the chair, I was just wondering, is there a correlation between those schools and the catchment zones that they're sitting in? is there kind of a socioeconomic tie to that statistic?
Through you, Chair, we actually, in an earlier slide, we had a map of where those schools are because I was thinking of a similar question. It was interesting to see that they were scattered kind of all throughout the board, actually. There wasn't, and while I wouldn't discount that there's probably some socioeconomic link or something, or, predispositions or whatever it might be, it was almost all throughout the board, in which case, because we were evaluating it against our how do we staff, if they were all clustered, that would be interesting. But no, it was really, we needed kind of people in all areas of the board, which is twice the size of Prince Edward Island. So it's certainly an interesting challenge to staff regionally. But I think, there probably is, a lot of literature says that some variance in those sorts of scores can be accounted for by, larger socioeconomic factors. But certainly there was no one kind of specific region or even just a cluster of 2 or 3 regions that in which it was a difficulty. It's kind of spread throughout.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. McAllister?
A comment and 2 questions, but my comment is that I congratulate you because this is a very visionary plan. It's responsive, it's comprehensive, it's tiered, and I think it will, as you say in the last slide, working together, it will make a difference for our students. My question, though, pertains to, say, slide 11. The first sentence there, enhance access to supports for stress and coping, etc. Whenever we hear the school improvement plans, one of the strategies is how to make students' learning visible. So I guess my question to you, how are you really going to make this plan visible?
Can I start perhaps? Through you, Chair. I'll start, and if you want to jump in after. One of the things that is exactly one of the things that we're working with principals on, about how do the students know. One of the, today, as we were working with them about mental health leadership, we asked schools 2 questions, and we have collected that data as our board baseline. And the first question was, what do you do so that students feel that they belong? And the second question is, what do you do as a school, not individually? And the second question was, how do students know where to go for help? How do you communicate that? So we have collected that data, and just our very quick scan based on that from this afternoon and without analyzing it, and we will be bringing that back at the next Family Schools meeting. Our question that arose in our minds was, and what is the evidence? How do you know? Do you do it all the time? So by using the cycle of inquiry that we're using in math and in literacy, it is about setting a goal, doing some strategies, then collecting the evidence. That's how we're going to know. And we have to have schools collect that evidence. We cannot go based on, oh, it feels good, or we think. We need evidence to show that what we're doing is working, and we need the observation and then the reflection about where do we need to go next? What are the students giving you in feedback about where do we need to go next? Is that good?
My second question pertains to, and I think you have answered it, but it pertains to measurement. And I'm wondering how you're going to measure this. And I know it's a difficult thing to measure, but I don't want to steal Student Trustee Marshall's thunder here at all, but the Ontario Student Trustee Association did a survey of over 4,000 students, parents, and educators recently. And one of the questions that they asked was, there are adequate mental health resources and supports in my school. Interestingly enough, the the students said 65% yes. The parents said 52% yes, and the educators said 56%. So clearly, you know, a third of the students felt that there was not adequate support. So, I mean, I just point to that as a one kind of measurement that has occurred that I know of recently, and I'm wondering if you would like to comment on that. Not that particular study, but
We'll just pass it
the
over.
measurement of it.
The director wants to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I appreciate the question. Part of what we are working on, both at the director work plan level and in terms of implementing our own district-wide student mental health plan, is looking at what are the measurements that will make a difference. It reminds me a bit about what came out through the Parents for Education, I guess it was last year, which one of their reports was measuring what matters. We're going to be in the same position, which we need to determine what matters. And what matters most is changes in how students perceive and behave in terms of their own self-care and their own view about how they feel at school. And I'd like to go back, of course, to the very basic premise of all this, which is when the board commissioned its own Ipso-Reid survey, they were on the right path about measuring what matters because they were asking the question about how students feel stress at school. So I think that's part of our beginning point there, and I do appreciate how the slide deck outlined what were the steps and measures that we were taking. I heard Dr. Armstrong mention, for example, a pilot that we were doing that was in conjunction with CHIO and with the University of Ottawa. We need to make sure that the strategies that we're using are research-based and that we have a way of validating what works, because we can't necessarily go with what people think would be kind of exciting, but yet we don't necessarily have grounds for seeing that that's going to make a difference in terms of how students feel or how they view their experience while they're with us during the school day. So these are still early days for us, of course, but we're certainly appreciative of the fact that the board gave us that baseline, that starting point. We're looking at how do students describe their experience at school and how do they feel, or if they're experiencing stress at school, what are we doing to eliminate the environmental factors around that, building strengthening and resiliency around that as a general practice to reach the outcome of what we saw here tonight in the overall vision of this plan, which is to make sure that we're actually coaching and growing students with the capacity to lead a successful life by looking at how do we give them practice about self-care and around well-being.
Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Dr. Armstrong talked about being a geek and liking some of the numbers here. I like some of the numbers too. I don't refer to myself as a geek though, but
you don't.
Well, I was trying to get them,
just
build a relationship here that we're not geeks. It's important that we have the data, and I think as you presented tonight, there's evidence there. You've talked about that key word that supports the work that we're doing, and when there's evidence that shows otherwise, there's a reaction to it, and that's the important piece. If you just rely on survey data, that's a lagging indicator. But the important piece is that if something transpires from 1 month to the next, there's the ability, or day to day even. There's the ability to respond and put the measures in place where they need to be. So I think we've come a long way. The important piece for me, that when we continue to use the evidence and the data, it allows us to make decisions to support those students, right? So all the decisions that we make at budget time to support the resources that we have in place, if there's other things that we can be doing that would, maybe it's not long-term, maybe it's short-term that's required, different things that can be done. So all of that will encompass and help us make some decisions that will support the work that you're doing, and at the end of the day, support our students so that they're able to achieve and proceed on to a successful life as a result of the work that we do. It's important that we take those steps and we have the early indicators and all the work that's in place, but sometimes people fall off the rails, right? EDI information is one thing, and by the time they're in grade 6 or 7, things have transpired. as a result of a lot of things around the socioeconomic side of things. So it's important for us to continue to have this dialogue, continue to have the data, and to support things that we're doing around our budget process. The only thing that I would comment on that we need to, and I've made these comments to you, to this group before, is the communication piece. We do great work, we just don't do a really good job telling people the work that we do, and it leads to the conversation about making sure that our students know what we're doing. And so not only do the students need to know, but our teachers need to know, and our communities need to know. I think sometimes people, communities in general, believe that there's a wasteland. A school is a wasteland. Kids go in and, all the ills of society are as a result of what happens in a school. And that's not the reality, right? We deal with what happens in our communities. Schools are a microcosm of what our community is. In fact, we do a lot of things to help restructure our communities. And we don't get the credit for that. And that's long work that we do. It's longitudinal. But we need to make sure that we have those conversations in our communities about the work that we're doing to help our students and not relying solely on outside resources. We have to from time to time when we get to level, or I always say level, tier 3. But there's important work that we're doing in our schools to make sure that our societies, our communities are thriving as a result of the work that we do to build our students and those citizens for tomorrow. So thank you for what you've done, and I look forward to more reports.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Wilson?
Partially going off of what John was talking about, and also just, I think this question mostly pertains to raising awareness, or as Trustee McDonald just said, letting students know what's going on. Is there any place in this plan, maybe it would be lower down when it starts to go more into schools, but for student involvement, student voice, or student leadership? I was wondering what sort of place that would have, and if it does have a place, then what would that look like?
Start with the director, then we'll pass it on.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, I appreciate the question as well, because everything that we do, we're doing on behalf of students. So it speaks to what Vice Chair McDonald just raised a moment ago about how are we making sure that there's a two-way communication. We learned that a lot through the Tell Them For Me survey experience, where we were asking and then we were doing, but we didn't necessarily inform students what our actions were as a result of their feedback that they gave to us. So I think we've come a long way in the last year to 18 months about recognizing that we need to bring it back for a conversation, and then we need to ask, do you see it in the school? Because we believe it's happening. And then we have to also ask about, if it's not being seen, what can we do to raise the visibility of the fact that we are intentionally trying to do things based on what students tell us is required to make them have a more successful and less stressful experience while they're in school with us. I'll turn it over to Superintendent Allen for a moment to see if there's anything else to comment about where is the student voice segue for this kind of dialogue.
Through you, Chair. One of the things that we recognized at our last Living Well meeting a few weeks ago, our steering committee did not have student representation on it, and that came out loud and clear, and so we will be adding student representation to that group. As the director referenced, the Tell Them From Me work has really come a long way and definitely informs the wellness goals within the school, and we see a place as the schools develop their own wellness goals to have student voice embedded in that. Some of the other strategies that we've been incorporating is social media. And when it actually started with the equity, the See My Voice, the work around that, where we tweet often about things that are happening in schools through Facebook or through Twitter, and you will often see Dr. Armstrong and Dr. Inglis retweeting things that are coming from other organizations as well. And I think the local teams in the schools are well equipped to reach out to the students, and they do do that. When they are signaled, when our system staff are signaled by students, they're hearing things from students, then they will reach back to the school administration to say, this is what we're hearing. How can we address this in our schools? So there is lots of room to grow in this area, you're right, but we are still trying to address it as we move along.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Wendy McPherson.
Just one, you mentioned that you get together with your principals and you discuss the safety issues. Is there any way that we could see those minutes at all, or is that internal stuff?
Mr. Chair, through you, we don't keep minutes of the operations meetings with principals. Many of the materials that we use at those meetings, the board sees as part of our presentations, because we do want to make sure that there's a universality about that. But if there are some specific questions, I'd be pleased to answer that, offline, and see if we have a need to share some other information that people are getting at the school level. But ordinarily, much of what you see through the board presentations goes to our staff, because we think it's got a functional value that way as well.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing there are none, I thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item. It is hard to believe where the last 20 years went. Years ago, I can remember working for Leeds and Grimble. And at that point in time, the board amalgamated. I think it was a forced marriage, shotgun wedding, but here we are 20 years later, and the director wants to address the hey, we're a happy family now. That's for the record. Director, I've just set you up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, literally and figuratively. So it's my pleasure to bring to the board this evening some considerations about the board's passing a milestone in January of 2018, which is, as you just heard from the chair, the 20th anniversary of the newly constituted Board of Education for Upper Canada. And I thought it would be important to bring to light what are some of the considerations right now that staff are looking at. The board may recall that last June we did bring forward to you, and then a second round in September, about special recognition days. We didn't necessarily flag this one for the board either in our discussion in June or at the end of September, because we were looking at multiple weeks or months of commitments that would have fallen outside of the special recognition days. But this this presentation this evening is matching the spirit of what we brought forward to you, I hope. And we want to give you some opportunity to hear what staff would like to present for you, and to see whether or not you have any feelings one way or the other about whether we should proceed as an organization to invest time and staff support in this focus. The chair just mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, the background to where we're at as an organization, and 20 years ago, as of January 1st, that the Fewer School Boards Act was passed by the province in 1997 and enacted by 1998 board amalgamations across Ontario, of which in Eastern Ontario we weren't exempt from that. We want to talk about the current considerations at this time about how we could possibly recognize and bring this to a level of public attention and to the attention of our schools and our student body. And the reason for that is primarily we did learn through the accommodation review dialogues last year that the public had not necessarily recognized or acknowledged that milestone that happened 2 decades ago. And in some ways, we're of the view that the previous structures of the boards of education were still, in some ways, still in effect. So we thought as a staff that there would be reason to bring a dialogue on an anniversary recognition event at school level, throughout the district, at the board office, and indeed at the board table as well. If we want to begin with what could be happening at schools, we wanted to mention that that there could be that recognition that happens during graduation, where we do have parents and students and members of the community together, which was an opportunity to highlight and recognize that at that special occasion that we could grant to students through a application process scholarships that would be recognizing this important milestone at the school level, and that would be over and above anything that the board is currently offering, for instance, our Character Always recognition. With regards to Character Always, it's something that the board values a great deal, and our organization has built a very strong commitment to this because we do believe that we're investing in minds and morals as a school system. And so because of that, is there something that we might want to do that recognizes Character Always in a unique way this year compared to what we do over the past many years at graduation events? We also have an opportunity to invest in our curriculum leadership and looking at how could we make a connection between the provincial curriculum and tie it into a 20th anniversary celebration. We learned a great deal, Mr. Chair, through our Canada 150 celebrations that we had throughout the district last year, and saw how schools were making conscious connections to the curriculum as well as to what the board was committing to as a very special event nationally. We see another opportunity to do that through maybe a green agenda and focus that as part of how we're trying to build both a focus on the 20th anniversary and also through the natural segues through the curriculum. We also know that grade 10 history has a strand on historical inquiry, and as well grade 10 civics and careers offers an opportunity for us to talk about the events from 1998 and create a very special focus to what does that mean in 2018. Not unlike what many members of the table did in October during the local governance week. Very successful, created a very favorable impression in terms of reaching into the schools about what is local governance as it applies to the board, and to have a second round of that kind of experience with our schools and with our students. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I also want to talk about the opportunity that we have throughout the system. You heard earlier in the previous presentation that we are a very large board, the size of Prince Edward Island, and we're very unique in terms of the different regions that are found within our board. What would happen if we use this anniversary as an opportunity to foster twinning of schools and sharing about our school cultures, about what's happening in one corner of the school system in Lanark, and make a connection out to what's happening out towards the Ontario-Quebec border with schools that are, very much statistical neighbors. And I say that in terms of the size of the schools, their ruralness, the types of values that they subscribe to and support. And some examples that I shared there in the slide deck as consideration where we could see very common dialogues going on. And in fact, Mr. Chair, I don't think that, and with the exception of some special event days and athletics, our students don't often know how large our school district really is, and that how many communities are part of the same learning that they're experiencing as well. In addition, there's the opportunity that throughout the system to sponsor guest speakers that align with the board's work plan and the director's work plan, and to highlight that as part of the 20th anniversary, another opportunity to bring people together in a sense of community on topics that they share and have a common interest, which they would like to share in different parts of the school district. At the board office, there's an opportunity for us to bring a greater presence of students and their what they're doing in their schools through artwork and renderings and photographs, either from the twin school visits or in fact through the curricular programs that's happening in the different art classes, and to ask them to talk about themes like past and present, or public education, or about what does it mean to learn in our rural environments and in our small cities. There's an opportunity for us, if we thought that that would be prudent, to review and refresh the board's library that is here on site, to invest in some professional and some student materials, and that could be used as a lending library as part of what we do with our Learning Commons model, and bring our board library into that network as well. Lastly, at the board table, we heard this idea periodically about is it possible that as part of the 20th anniversary celebration to hold some board meetings off-site between January 2018 and December 2018 as part of allowing us to have connections with local schools and students who could attend a board meeting. They can certainly watch it, of course, online, and that's always one of the options in this digital age, but to actually be part of that experience in an environment close to where they reside. So these are very early days and very early ideas, Mr. Chair. I present them to the board just to have food for thought. They're not necessarily haven't been finalized at all, and that really is a question about if we were going to go that way, how do we talk about the anniversary and what we were tending to do in schools across the district at the board level, and lastly, to talk about our stories and what is our stories from the past 20 years? Where do we see that we've actually committed to the development of communities and invested in community development through creating great citizens who are literate, numerate, and good people? Our next steps, Mr. Chair, depending on what it would be the will of the board, if they thought this is, again, something that staff should continue to invest in and come back with some tangibles versus these sort of general food for thought items, is to create an advisory panel so that we could have students, staff, alumni, and trustees give us some feedback about how we would be proceeding, to finalize how we wanted to go forward by no later than March, and to get that underway in the spring of 2018 and then throughout the remainder of this calendar year. So, Mr. Chair, I'll leave that with you and with the board to see whether or not they have any comments or feedback for us as a staff, and to see whether or not this would be something that they would wish us to land on, given the milestone that we talked about this evening.
Thank you, Director. You certainly have given us a lot to look at and consider, but it comes down really to one simple question, and that is, does the Board of Trustees want to have you invest time and energy into this? So I think I just want to open it up, get a feel from the trustees, because I think the feedback is critical. If it's positive, you move forward. If it's a hold, you stop or slow down. So I think it's important that we as trustees get our opinions out right now in terms of how we feel about us being 20 years old, and how we feel about spreading that word and making, seeing the value of being 20 years old. So I'm going to just open it up for comments or questions. Trustee Wendy McPherson.
Wow. I think there is a lot here. I guess I think that some of these things are going to have some dollar connections to them, and I wonder. My first question is, where would that be coming from? Not that I like the ideas. I think it's interesting to see to move the board meetings. It's always been something my end has been crying about. So it'll be interesting to see if we can make those work, and you've got some work here if you wanted to make them so. I think all of it would be worthwhile, but I'd be interested to see what the money connections were too. Thanks.
So I think you've asked a critical question. Director, you have a ballpark or at least a general idea of money?
Mr. Chair, through you, if the entire wish list was to proceed, it would be approximately $125,000. We would want to work within whatever budgetary options are available to us through, we wouldn't want to be bringing new costs to the board necessarily. And so part of whatever we would do, if the board wishes us to proceed, is that we would need to be very conscious about how far could we go based on the dollars that we would have available in existing budgets.
And where would that money come from in the budget?
Right. So currently, Mr. Chair, through you, there's a director's budget that does have a community liaison connection to it, and the Board of Trustees also has a budget as well. And so that would be our starting point, and we would determine whether or not there was any other dollars that we could use that's already been committed to other means, for instance, curriculum or instructional experiences.
Thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Yeah, speaking for myself, it'd be interesting to see what happened in the 3 years that I wasn't there. But anyways, my feeling on the rotating meetings is that rather than trying to conduct board business, maybe there should be simply information sharing. Talk about the history of the board, talk about where we've been, where we want to go. Not so much as to expect people to sit for 2 to 3 hours and watch what we normally do at meetings. And I'm not being condescending, it's just that's the way it is with politics. And I have one comment on the twinning of schools. Bearing in mind that we are the size of Prince Edward Island, if you're actually going to physically visit schools, you're going to have some pretty constrictive logistics there. You're basically stuck between 8 in the morning and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's something that we want to look at.
Trustee Parker?
On slide number 10, there's a mention of preliminary considerations for staff to explore. The last bullet you've got there is Chair and Vice Chair Forum, leading the district over the past 20 years. When Trustee McPherson mentioned giving the history of the board, what were you looking at from that particular forum? What would be involved in that?
Mr. Chair, through you, it would be the opportunity to reach out to former chairs and vice chairs of the board if they are able and willing and available, to have a conversation that we could document about how they steered public education over that 20-year period. Again, it was just part of a sort of a brainstorming session about what could be some of the options, but that was really the intent there.
Trustee Wendy McPherson.
Okay, so establishing a 20th anniversary scholarship for the grade 12 graduates, what would be the criteria are you thinking of there? Or is that on a slide?
So again, Mr. Chair, through you, it was just, again, a possibility of creating a recognition that the board does, not unlike its character always commitments. The amount and the frequency of that, whether it was at each school or whether it was a set amount that students from all schools could apply and a committee could adjudicate about who would be the candidates that would be awarded the scholarship. Those things would need to be determined again, both based on budget and based on your direction.
Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. I think it's important to recognize 20 years, but you know, I'm not in favor of spending $125,000 to do that. I'm not in favor of taking our valuable human resource time to sit down and look at a panel on what we can do. I think the important work that we need to do as a board is to make sure that our students are moving, progressing through their academic years. Let's throw a 20 behind the Upper Canada, and we've recognized that we've been around for 20 years. It doesn't cost a lot of money for that. I think it's important to know that we've been in existence for 20 years, but I don't know the value in having a 20-year celebration. I don't see the value. I think there's more important work for us to do than to spend time on talking about the last 20 years. We've got huge, huge things to do.
Thank you. Trustee Marshall? Or Marshall Wilson?
Student
trustee.
Continuing with Trustee McDonald's thought about just a comment on, I think it would be an option to utilize student leadership as well in some of the student-involved initiatives like twinning schools or something like that. You could really utilize student leadership in that, and then you would minimize how much personal resources you'd have to expend or how much money would be involved in setting those things up. That's just a comment that I would add.
Is that Trustee Cram?
I like the concept. It's very ambitious, though. Let's see, the main thing I would be saying about it, as somebody who's been through 3 amalgamations in my career, going back to starting in Chesterville in September and getting swallowed up by SD&G in January, and then having to go through the amalgamation from that in '98 again, and then to see where our current board is. I'd be really interested to see the history, and I believe a lot of people don't know the history of Upper Canada District School Board. Recent experience would say we close schools. I don't think they're aware of how the board has grown to start with before we had to close schools. So I'd be more interested in the history of the board as a celebration in that 20 years than going to the ambitious of all of it. So I think you need to pick and choose to go from there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Trustee McAllister?
I too agree that it's rather ambitious, and I wouldn't want to see us spend a great deal of our resources on it. But nevertheless, I think there's an opportunity here to review our history, to recognize past builders, to emphasize our commitment to each of the areas in our board and to involve students in that. I think it's perhaps a wonderful opportunity to promote public education. So I'm in favor. I don't necessarily want a dog and pony show.
I think there's been some conversation here, and we're getting a sense that perhaps maybe we should proceed, but not in a large scale. And if we wanted to further hash this out at Management Council and come back with a smaller plan to help the senior staff proceed with this, that would be my suggestion, that we take it to Management Council and have a look at it. I see some positive things coming out of that.
I don't think it should go to Management Council, frankly. I think it should go to the Directors Committee that he has mentioned.
Well, the assumption is that...
Not the job.
We're assuming that he's going to create that. Like that wouldn't be created if the Board of Trustees are saying scale it down. So there would not be that committee. The only reason it would go to Management Council would be to have this returned with the input. And the input that I'm hearing is very clear, is that it's a grand plan, but it can't go that big. The board is not interested in spending a ton of money on this, but it's important that the message gets out, and we don't want to task our staff to be doing work that they have to already do in other areas. I think that's a very clear message, and that could easily go to Management Council, and the director would be very clear if everyone agrees that there is some element of importance to this. In other words, knowing we've been around 20 years. However, the grand plan is too big, and the cost is too high. So I think that's clear, and I think that's Trustee McAllister, where we would get that back from Management Council to another presentation that would reflect all of that. We wouldn't create it ourselves. It's giving the director basically having him show us what's coming back to us, and all of us in Management Council very clear on what the trustees have already said right now. Trustee Bill McPherson.
If I remember correctly, I hope I do, we had a previous celebration for the 10th or the 15th. David Darkey took the lead on that.
It would have been 10th.
It probably was the 10th. Maybe we need to look back and see what was done then. It wasn't a huge thing, but there was a distinct recognition that we had crossed a 10-year milestone.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee McDonald.
I think it's important that if we think there's some value in certain aspects of this to talk about promoting public education, then that's something we should encompass and build into our board work plan and our director work plan. It shouldn't be a one-off, and it shouldn't be an extra project that comes up. We have to, keep in mind that we've got projects that are underway, and I think there's, as Trustee McAllister said, there's some good opportunities here to help promote that. It doesn't necessarily need to be 20 years. It needs to be something that we do on a regular basis and not just on the 20th year, and concentrate on how we communicate with our communities moving forward. So that's one aspect. I think if that's what the wishes of the board is to talk about those kinds of things, then that's an important segment to make sure to take out. I don't necessarily want our communities to be involved in celebration of 20 years. I think there's more to do in our communities than having these celebrations.
Okay. Trustee Bill McPherson.
For you, Chair.
Hang on, Trustee Swan. Trustee Bill McPherson first, and then Trustee Swan.
I think it should be a process of acknowledging 20 years, not necessarily celebrating 20 years.
Thank you. Trustee Swan?
There's a few. I'm in favor of this, except I agree with the cost, and the cost factor has to be a lot lower. But there's many ideas in here that are not going to cost a lot, such as board meetings being held in different areas. And it doesn't have to be done over 1 year or 2 years. It doesn't have to just be in recognition of this 20-year event. I wouldn't suggest that we start in January with bad weather season when everyone's used to coming to Brockville and there are hotels here, but perhaps we could do it at a different time. I do think we recognize our students, alumni, staff, and community. In the schools, if we want to do it at board meetings, that's another thing, but that's another non-cost. Like, there's a lot of non-cost items in here, pretty much. But I'm for it. The scholarship opportunity, I would like to hear back on what other boards do this and how they do this, and that's just something that I'd be very interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Swan. Okay, the Director, I think you've got lots of input there. Okay, lots to think about. Trustees, thank you very much for that. I think we've painted the picture very clear in terms of how we feel about this. I appreciate that. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is the Upper Canada Policy Revision, Smoke-Free Environment, Policy 441. I'm going to turn this over to Director Sliwa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, ladies and gentlemen of the board, from time to time, staff brings back to the board matters related to the policy register that they maintain, and to update or to align the policy with developments that are new and that would be current and needs to be reflected in how the board creates the framework for us to operate schools and the school district. In this case, Mr. Chair, before you this evening is Policy 441, Smoke-Free Environment. It's been on the books for quite some time, as you'll note from, I believe it was 2002 that it was first instituted as part of the board's policy register. And there has been a number of different pieces of legislation contained in the board report that has since come forward and would have some influence on the policy as it's currently drafted. Attached to the board report this evening is recommendations in highlighted font and one strikeout as well. The three basic changes being brought forward to the board this evening is, number one, recognizing that the Smoke-Free Ontario Act and the Electronic Cigarette Act are key pieces of legislation now that are part of promoting the smoke-free environment that the board desires in its schools and workplaces. Secondly, as part of our commitment to focusing on Indigenous education and Indigenous learning in our schools and work sites, the Smoke-Free Ontario Act provides a cultural exemption for the presence of tobacco in schools under very strict and certain circumstances as it relates to the traditional use of tobacco as part of Indigenous culture and spirituality. And within the recommended revisions to this policy is that cultural exemption with some expectations that the use of that tobacco product in those cases would be brought forward in advance to the school principal or appropriate superintendent, and to make provisions for that to occur within the school, and to build an understanding among the school staff, school community, and student body about why it would be present under those circumstances and not permissible in other circumstances as part of the day-to-day school operation. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, to make sure that we've acknowledged the Electronic Cigarette Act and its premise about promoting public health, that there's some view among some segments of the school population that the use of e-cigarettes is somehow less of a health risk. The Ontario Public Health has made it very clear that it is not a healthy practice and detrimental to the well-being of others. And it certainly would go contrary to the board's efforts to maintain a smoke-free environment. So, Mr. Chair, I'll leave those considerations to you and to the board, and see if there's any questions or comments about the recommended revisions to the board's policy.
Thank you, Director. I should have called, at least that motion before you did that, but I'm going to open it up to questions and comments. We'll come back to the motion later. Trustee McPherson.
It says Smoke-Free Ontario Act as they apply to buildings and properties of the board. Where do school vehicles come into bearing? Are our employees allowed to smoke in the white vans we see floating around delivering stuff between schools? My next question would be, what about school buses? You don't mention anything about vehicles under contract or lease to the board.
So, Mr. Chair, through you, both the Smoke-Free Ontario Act and the Electronic Cigarette Act mentions schools specifically as defined within the Education Act. It does not talk about the means in which we transport students back and forth. That would fall under school and school board code of conduct, and as a result, any kind of practice that's prohibitive at schools, it extends to the school buses, as we know.
So it's covered under this. Now, will that extension apply to the vapors or whatever they call them, the electronic cigarettes as well?
Mr. Chair, through you, the Electronic Cigarette Act recognizes vapor forms of emissions as part of being prohibited on schools and school property.
So it's all covered. Okay.
Trustee Wendy McPherson.
With the plan of the federal government's releasing or legalizing marijuana, will your provisions to help us try to mediate that with our students, is that going to go into this document, or will it go into another document?
Mr. Chair, through you, that's an excellent question. Our legal advice is that it needs to be a standalone document.
It'll stand alone. Thank you.
Trustee Cran.
No fast.
Trustee McDonald.
I just wanted to comment on that. The perspective is that it would be encompassed under our regular code of conduct. So smoke-free, whether it's vapor, whether it's whatever, it would be covered. OPSPA is addressing locations of the sites, but they've looked at the current situation under board's policies would cover the use of the property.
Any other questions? All right, so I have a motion that the applicant... Oh, sorry, Trustee Swan.
I just had a question. When will the procedures for enforcement of this policy be updated?
Can you say that again, Trustee Swan?
When will the procedure for the enforcement of this policy be updated, such as if people are smoking or vaping on a school property?
Director?
Mr. Chair, through you, there is no procedure for this policy since it's a provincial statute, and so we would we would enforce the school board and school code of conduct, and we do have a procedure for that. If there is any kind of violation of this practice, it would be followed up through public health, who would send an officer by and would do the enforcement there beyond the school staff and school administration providing oversight and supervision of the school site.
Okay, Trustee Swan?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the recommended revisions to its Policy 441, Smoke-Free Environment, December 13th, 2017, moved by Trustee Bill McPherson, seconded by Trustee Wendy McPherson. I ask you to cast your votes, please. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our next item. This is a report from OPSA, from our director. You kind of led into that a little bit.
Thank you, yes. Attached, there is a summary document of the meeting, but I want to go over a couple of highlights for you. Around our legislative update, you all were aware that there was a sector engagement discussion guide that was submitted by our board into the government around areas of integrity commissioner, trustee honoraria, electronic participation in board meetings, student trustee terms of office, and broadening the director of education qualification. Around discussion in that section, there was also some information that was shared with the board of directors that during the federal budget there was some work that was being done by the federal government to eliminate the 1/3 tax-free component of the trustee honorarium. So we're waiting for some updates on that. That would impact, or that would only come into play in January 2019. So as you know, 1/3 of our trustee honorarium is tax-free. Second item that we talked around legislation was changes coming to municipal and school board elections. The act was approved, and the significant change, nomination day now moves to May 1st, 2018 instead of January 1st, and nominations close in July instead of September. Election day would be October 22nd, 2018, and the start date remains December 1st. They're only looking at changing the term start date for the 2022 election year. OPSPA will, as we progress through the year, OPSPA will be coordinating a series of resources to support candidates in the upcoming election. That's not what I wanted. The next piece is around Ministry's Advisory Committee around First Nations. So the Ministry intends to share an embargoed copy of a third progress report around the Ministry's Advisory Council on January 11th. That'll focus on the work that's been done thus far and potentially lead to other changes that will come forward around Indigenous education. The other thing that was talked about was some work that the Ministry completed over the summer. In the 2017 budget for the Ontario government, they invested $21 million over a 3-year period in services for youth in care. The Ministry is developing a transportation service initiative as well as creating a new education liaison role. So those are individuals that are in care and having some issues associated to attending school. It really led well into the conversation that we had on the Friday evening with the Children's Aid Society Association being there. And so what they found from the Children's Aid's perspective was that as students or children were being moved from foster care to foster care, they were also being moved from school to school. And so the initiative is providing some funding to assist on that transportation so that those students could remain in a particular school, albeit that the foster care might change from time to time. We also talked about some initiatives around PPM 161, supporting students with prevalent medical conditions There are some linkages on the government's website to talk about that, but there are requirements for boards to have implementation by September 2018. We're encouraged to provide feedback and amendments to the government as required. Last thing, I already covered that. One of the last things I wanted to talk about was around French as a second language. The ministry released a document in October 28th, around French as a second language, and there were a number of announcements or initiatives that were associated to that. 8 in particular around French as a second language and steps to address teacher supply and demand concerns in priority areas. So the minister announced develop provincial communication strategy highlighting job opportunities for aspiring French language and French as a second language teachers. Work with Ontario College of Teachers in streamlining the evaluation of credentials for international educated teachers. Work with Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development Ontario and the Association of Deans of Education to expedite the development and delivery of flexible teacher education models. Work with the Ontario Association of Deans of Education and other stakeholders to better align mission and demands for various teachables. Develop bridging programs to help newcomers adjust and prepare for teaching in Ontario, including a mentorship opportunity. Pilot a program to provide financial support for existing teachers to take AQs and or ABQs in priority areas. Develop new supply and demand forecasting models responsive to emerging teacher supply issues in the future, and establish formal structures for engagement of all stakeholders on monitoring of emerging issues and developing solutions to address them. So we've heard from time to time that we do have issues attracting and keeping teachers in the French programming. Oftentimes we have teachers who will be hired, qualified as French teachers, and then move on to teach other subjects. So it is an issue in our board, it is an issue across the province, and the minister has taken some steps to address that through her initiatives that were announced. Public Education Symposium coming up in January 26th, 27th are the official dates. The pre-symposium was on the 25th, and I think all the links were sent to you earlier by Lisa if you're interested in attending. That is my report this evening.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions, Trustee Cramp?
Thank you, Chair. Through Trustee McDonald, it may need to go to the Director. On PPM 161, I was privy to the program policy or program committee meeting in Toronto. We had a great deal of discussion on the PPM 161, and I know it does affect the school board and particularly the operational part of it. Is there anything we as Board of Trustees need to know as to how restrictive this policy is going to be as far as who can actually administrate the medical conditions?
Doctor?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, I think it would be helpful if we had a dialogue so you could provide that feedback. We've had a first run at it as a staff and spoke about it last week, as a matter of fact. One of the things I think that the board would want to be aware of is that it has moved from some clarity about what people will or shall do, and there's a lot of shoulds. And the shoulds create a lot of gray for dealing with a very significant policy restructuring that has great implications for running schools. So I think the second run at the ministry, I think we would want them to help us to understand what our shoulds were shalls before, or wills, in previous policy program memorandums. And we're wondering why there's been a change in that disposition, because we've built staff training and some of our commitments annually around staff meetings, around some of those specific policies. As they seem to be put under one general umbrella, there seems to be a greater discretion. Yet I'm quite certain that that's not where the ministry is trying to land on this particular direction. So perhaps we could have a follow-up and share with you some of the observations that we have.
Thank you. Trustee McDonald?
I would just say that the new PPM tries to encompass everything into a consolidated version. It does address the fact that if boards do have existing policies that are handling, you know, the things around Sabrina's Law, Ryan's Law, those kinds of things, they need to just make sure that they're up to date based on the current PPM. So I think it's the consolidated view is better, and I know through previous discussions around our policy owners, our holders, sorry, around the individual policies that we currently have, kind of saw some of this happening, or that was going to come down the pipe, and that there was some feeling internally that there's probably a need for us to have our own consolidated health, student health policy type initiative, just so that it's not, you know, 4 different documents, and, you know, students have this, but they also have this, and having to search for it. So we do have some time. The expectation is September 2018. So maybe coming back with further reports would help that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for that report. Director, do you have any closing comments?
I do, Mr. Chair. Just 2 pieces to bring to the board's attention. You heard this evening in 2 of our school presentations that schools continue to be invested in improvement planning around the instructional program. We were at a tremendous event today with our principals, where we were looking at samples of plans and how they are preparing for the second cycle of school improvement dialogue. Why I bring that to you is that every one of us around this table can appreciate how busy it is to supervise a school setting, look after students, be available to meet with parents, and promote our good work in the community. Our staff at schools recognize their core business commitments, and they're really upholding that in a very realistic, authentic way. And I'm very, very proud of us as an organization for doing that. I'm very proud of our senior team that's promoting that as part of their school visits, because I do think that we will see those improvements, because we're talking about the things that matters and that counts for student learning, and for them to get very proficient at the things that we desire for them in order for them to have that successful life. Secondly, Mr. Chair, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that it has been a very productive and very significant school year operationally, and we're so appreciative of what all of our operational staff have done over the last 4 months, and we hope that they're prepared to have a great holiday rest and time with their families to get recharged and come back and be in good shape with us for the new year.
Thank you, Director. 2017 is coming to an end. Many years I said to myself, I don't know where the year went, but this year I know where it went. A very clear picture of where this year went. It's burned in my memories and will be there forever. Trustees, I hope each and every one of you have a safe holiday season. I'm looking forward to having you back here in the new year. You know, when I sit and I reflect about what happens in our schools with our staff, and when I think about our principals and vice principals and our office administrators and our custodians, then I look down at the end of the table and I see our superintendents and I see my director beside us. Education is a very challenging profession, much more challenging than I think anyone in the public knows, because it's a balance of time. People are so passionate about what they do every day that they have to give so much time to this profession. And a time that's coming up over the Christmas holidays is a time to get that balance back, because there's nothing more important than family. Nothing. That's why you guys get up in the morning, and that's why you go home at night, because you've got people there who care about you and love you. And sometimes you haven't been able to give them the time that they need, but they need it. For some of us, it's going to be a tough Christmas. I know it is. Please know that our thoughts are with you. But it's a time of family. It's a time of getting together. It's a time of just embracing the love that's around you. So I wish each and every one of you a good holiday. Happy New Year. We'll see you back in January. Thank you. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board will be adjourned at 8:52 by, we'll reconvene January the 10th, 2018, moved by trustee Wendy McPherson, seconded by trustee Bill McPherson. A show of hands. Safe travels, everyone. Thank you very much.